has been dropping hints that it's about time to redo our bedroom, and we've already planned out everything we want to do, but we haven't talked about when we're going to do it. But she's out of town for the weekend, so I decided I'm going to see how much I can get done while she's gone, but realistically, she's going to come home to a massive mess. Either way, we got to start eventually. All right, let's jump into it. So this is a tour of our bedroom, and it's not very big. Basically, we have 3 windows on this side. We have a king-size bed with a bed frame, which she actually recently purchased. We have some double doors into a closet. And then on this wall, we have our dresser and a barn door that goes into the bathroom. So the first thing we already talked about is going to be a feature wall here with a green wall that we're going to do to match some of the other rooms in the house that will have some lights on it and a little bit of texture to it, but be very open. We did try actually buying and putting a big photo over here, but we just found it was way too much clutter, way too much going on. So that'll be that. We're actually shooting this little sequence because we weren't supposed to have this bed frame yet, and she went and bought the bed frame, so we now have a bed frame apparently. We have our white nightstands that we're not sure what we're going to do with yet. The walls are going to be some kind of cream color. Right now our walls are all purple. We want to get rid of that, so we're going to do some kind of cream color here. We're looking at a couple of different ones right now. Still got to pick the final one. And with our closet, I have to repaint the doors, redo all the trim in the entire room, and also redo the hardware as well, and move them from here to over here where there's a little more solid connection. So lots to do in this room. Don't know if I'm going to get it done this weekend, but I want to see if I can do a Home Depot run tonight for the trim and for the electrical. So the first things I got to figure out is how much trim I'm going to need to do this room. So I'll figure out that roughly. Then after that, we can start to figure out the electrical as well to get some supplies. Now I'm going to figure out all that off camera, but let's jump into a little grabbing supplies montage. What do you think? Happy?
Yeah. Do they have the knob?
No. So it's 8 p.m. Saturday night. I got one more day before Kristen gets back. So my goal tonight is to take all the trim off all the walls in here, get it all numbered, and bring it downstairs. And that way I can basically use each piece of trim as a template for the new piece. And I'm hoping by doing it that way, it'll be faster than I've done in the past, which is measuring, recutting, and that kind of thing. So there'll be a couple pieces on here that I have to mark an asterisk because they're going to fit slightly different now with the thicker trim. But I'm just going to go around the room, number every piece, and all I need for that is my little trim puller. This just goes flat against the wall, and that way it can't kind of wreck your drywall, which is great. Hammer, and then Sharpie to number it all. Let's start going. Now this tool I'm using here is called a trim puller, and the reason I actually like it so much is because you can basically place it against the drywall and it does no damage. So sometimes you see people use like putty knives, or you see them use pry bars and they go right through the drywall. It's really easy. But with this, there's zero damage done. I'll have a link to it down below if you want to pick one up for yourself. Best tool I have for trimming. Okay, So the first thing I'm going to do for this is paint the trim. That's the goal for the weekend, is just to get the trim on. So in the past when I've done trim, I've done it where I have put all the trim in place and then I painted it in position. That's okay, but it kind of is tough with carpet. I tried cutting it all, then painting it, and then just installing it. That was a little bit of a pain because I had to do touch-ups anyways, and painting all these really small pieces just sucked, so not doing that. This time I'm going to paint all the trim in the longest sections I can because I think that'll be the easiest, and to make it hopefully even easier, bought a sprayer. I've had a really shitty sprayer before, the Wagner kind of handheld one, and I've upgraded to the Control Pro 130, so hopefully that makes it a lot faster. All I'm going to do here is get it primed. I'm just using a basic super paint trim paint here. And let's see if I can crank this out really fast. Now I'm already behind because that barn door that I saw yesterday, that black, I actually went back this morning and I was able to get a discount on it because there were some nicks. So I got it down $50 to $150, and our old door actually just sold for $180. So I've been kind of doing this flip-flop all morning. So getting a little late start today to this, but let's see if this works. Spray it into here first, let's see. Oh, look at that. Oh, that's sick. So I'm gonna start at the back. Some ugly spots. Just gonna try and brush in a bit. All right, so when it's clogged, you rotate it, unclog it, rotate it back. Let's see if that worked. That worked like a charm. Let's go. So I didn't plan for that to be that quick. I thought this was still gonna take me a half hour, an hour to get all this done, but I have all of the trim painted. There's overspray to the thing, but zero overspray anywhere else. 5 minutes of setup, 5 minutes of spray, and it's done. All right, prepped. Let's just go here. So we'll go from there to there all the way. Done. All right, let's let that dry. Not bad, it'll flatten out. We'll come back and we'll do these ones. All right, check it out. Trim off the windows. This is 3. So they just pop off like this. 4, 5. This makes it 7. Okay, so we got this piece. And we'll come back for that one. It's a big one. Look at this itty bitty one here. 8, 9. So this one we will call closet left, closet right, which we actually don't need, and closet right. We shouldn't need these because it's a door frame, they're all the exact same size. Now all the door frames should be, I think, 81, so I actually don't need to save any of these. I can just cut them to the appropriate size, which is great. I can just take a separate pile directly right outside. Okay, so here's the plan. I basically have all my trim stored over there, and with it, it's already all labeled, and so I know which pieces come out of which pieces of the trim, because I basically figured out the math when I figured out how many boards I would need. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take one of these pieces from upstairs that I labeled, and I'm gonna use that as a template on the piece, and then after I basically use the template, I'm going to cut it in half and just discard it here, and I think this should work. Now the reality is this worked, but really not as well as I was hoping it would. Honestly, especially bringing all this trim all the way downstairs from the top floor of my house to the bottom floor, it was just way more work than I wanted to do here, and I should have just thrown it all in the garbage and just took measurements like I normally would. So I like where I was going with it, but really just not useful. Now after that, I started to attach all the trim to the walls, and basically what I'm doing is I'm attaching it to the studs, and I'm only putting it on the top third of the trim, and that way I don't have to do any touch-up paint closer to the carpet. So I only put nails in the studs on the top part of it. I push them all in, that way they're flat, and that way I just got to come back with my DryDex, do a little bit of fill, although this one here I made it a little too tight and I got it jammed, and then I broke it trying to get it out, and now I'm pissed. But I basically had to go around hammering a bunch of the different nails here, and then I went over top with the headers. Now the headers, they are pretty much a 3/4 inch overhang on each side, and that's what I'm measuring here, but all that matters is it's centered. If it's a 1/2 inch or if it's 5/8, it doesn't really matter, just make sure it's centered on that door frame. So I have a little more give with this style of trim, which is why I really like it. Speeds things up, you don't have to worry about having really clean, crisp miters. Now, after I got all the trim installed, the next thing I had to tackle was the old door frame here. So essentially what the previous owners did is there was a door on here that went into the bathroom, but they took off that door. As you can see, they basically had the stops on here, and they just left it as an opening. Now, this is a bathroom, and we didn't want to just leave it as an opening, so we put our barn door over top of this. But we wanted to make it actually look like it was intentional now and get rid of everything what the old door jamb had. So that meant removing the stops from the inside, taking all the old material off here and giving it a nice flat paintable surface, and then also going back over with Bondo, which we'll do later, and filling in on the hinge locations and the other parts. Okay, so today is Sunday, and so I've kind of just done a bunch of really small tasks around here, kind of just clean things up a little bit. So I had to replace some casing that didn't fit quite right, so I just painted that on the spot. I did that today. I cleaned up and redid some of these holes on the top here, like I kind of got rid of some of the loose paint, countersunk some of these screws to make it easier for them to be filled after the fact. I took off the door jamb on the inside of this, which I thought was going to be a lot of work to scrape, sand, Bondo, and redo that whole door jamb on the inside, but it actually came off in like this super satisfying pieces, and because of that, all I have to do is basically Bondo in where the hinges used to be, and like it's ready to go. And the MDF that's underneath there is 30 years old but untouched and in like perfect condition, so that's gonna be super easy to paint. So all I want to do tonight is I want to experiment. I've never used Bondo before. Oh, I did one more thing. Took off all the hinges. I take off all the nameplates, all the plates for all the outlets, the light bulbs, all that kind of stuff, and I just always put those in a bin on the side, and that way I can find all that stuff after. And all I want to do now is I'm going to try Bondo for the first time, and I'm going to Bondo where all the hinges used to be to make the door jamb smooth, where the lock used to be, and then if I have any Bondo left over, I'm going to fill in all the miters on the windows, because some of them are a little looser than I want. Yeah, let's try some with Bondo. I've never tried this before. So I've never worked with Bondo before, so this is going to be a new experience for me. So with the Bondo, I have to take this kind of cover off of it. Okay. And then what do I got in here? I get the Bondo, I get this like metal mesh. That stuff is already stinky, holy shit, I did not know. Okay, so we have the metal mesh, and then there should be a little spreader on the inside here, but I'm not quite sure how to get this thing out. Why did they do this? Oh, they put a freaking staple. Metal mesh, which I'm not gonna need. Throw that in here for now. Okay, now it's actually getting stinky, so I'm gonna throw my mask on. So they said for a golf ball size piece of this, you put a 3 centimeter line of the cream mixed together, that gives you your hardness. So I'm gonna try mixing that up now. Mask is going on. Alright, so golf ball, I have 2 hinges, I think I need 2 golf balls. Let's go 3 golf balls to be safe. 3 golf balls. This is so much stinkier than I thought it was going to be. Alright, we're just going to clean this up quick, get this lid back on. Okay, now 3 centimeter lines. 1, 2, 3, a little extra. Okay, let's get this in this container resealed. Now, mix it together. This little spreader is useless. This thing is way too small. Use a stir stick maybe, in case this works any better. Okay, I have to work quicker than I thought. I mixed up way too much. Get over top. That's set up in like minutes. I didn't expect that. Now, I went back and finished all that Bondo work, but honestly, I don't think I'm going to be using Bondo much in the future. It was so stinky. It basically stunk out our bedroom for the night, and we had to sleep somewhere else with fans with our window open in the winter. So that was a terrible idea. I did not do enough research on Bondo before I got into it, but after that, I kind of just called it a night, and then the next morning, I went back with my DryDex and filled in any little gaps I had, any little issues in the drywall, and then all the nail holes. So I sunk all the nails in, and then I go back with my DryDex, my little putty knife, and just fill everything in. You can put on as thick as you need right now. That way you know where it is when it's sandable. Sometimes I actually found out if I put it too thin, I would totally miss it when I'd go back and sand, even if I did like these little touch-up spots. So for me, I found better to put it on thick, and that way I know exactly where it is to sand, and I can get it exactly the way I need. Okay, so it's Saturday, and I basically picked away at a bunch of small stuff over the week, just at nights when I had some free time. So the first thing I did is I went around and I filled all the little nail holes. So you can see I just filled them with a little bit of DryDex, and I went around and I filled all those. So those are ready to be sanded and then do the final coat of paint on that. I fixed any nail holes as well. We have this done. You can also see that the closet doors are off, and that is because I just took the closet doors downstairs, and we're going to paint the closet doors and put new hardware on them and fill the old holes where the hardware was with Bondo. So we're gonna do that right after this. We have all the trim. The trim is all on. Some of the gaps are going to need to be filled with some caulk, like this one, little gap there. We're going to have to go around and fix some of that kind of stuff. If we go over here, I fixed the barn door. I filled all the holes for where the ledger board or the header is going to go for the barn door to attach. And after that, I went and I tried my hand with Bondo for the first time. So I basically mixed up some Bondo. I filled in all these holes. So I did the original hinge location there. I did the other hinge location there. and then I also did where the latch was on the door before, so I'm gonna have to sand all this down. I do not recommend working with Bondo, or at least knowing how bad it smells. That was terrible. Then I used some of the Bondo on some of the gaps and some of the miters. So you can see just a little bit of Bondo there, a little bit on some of the other ones here, and went around and did that. So the next step is gonna be closet doors. Let's do that next. Okay. So the process for sanding the doors is pretty simple. I have 3 doors to do today. I have to do the 2 bifold doors in the closet, and I'm also going to do the bifold door at the front door, because I might as well do them at the same time. Essentially, what we have to do are 3 different things. The first one we have to do is sand it all down. So we'll sand it with 150. It is a latex door. This is not oil-based before, so it is fine to just sand and then respray another coat on it. I've done other doors in my house already, so that's how I know that. So I'm basically just going to sand the entire door down, break all the edges with a sanding sponge to get inside all of the grooves, and then after I'm done that, I have it basically all sanded. I have to prime to make it a little more even and fill these holes where the old handles used to be. So I got to fill those with Bondo, and then after I fill those, so these are the new door handles. So basically I have these, I have the screws, and then instead of them being in the center like this, we're going to move them to half on here. We have 2 threads on this one, so I'd like to get that through there like so, and I think it'd look a little better. I think if they're in the middle it looks a little bit odd. I don't love that, so I'm going to move them to more like a traditional door, which would be somewhere over on this side, maybe like split this, something like that maybe. So yeah, we'll replace those, do that. I don't know if this is a tip helpful or not, but you should always, if you are going to plan on redoing a lot of things in your house, make sure if you're buying the hardware, buy everything at once. If you're buying it on Amazon, it gets discontinued and moves so fast. So I have, for every door and every thing in my house, I have every door and everything, and that way if it got discontinued on Amazon, I still have it. So that's the plan. All you gotta do is start sanding. Now, one mistake I actually made on these is sanding through the paint down to the MDF, and if you do that, it's just going to give you a different finish, so it's not going to really look consistent on the door. See everywhere it's brown here? You actually don't want that. You just want to scuff the paint and not go through it like it did. So again, I thought I was doing it because it looked right, looked more sanded, but reality is it actually made it harder for me to paint. We're going to try filling basically all the holes in all the doors where the hardware used to be, and my idea is going to be that we're going to fill it with spray foam from the inside, and then we can use that spray foam as essentially a backer material, so that way we can add like some DryDex over top and then recreate the wood lines within that. So that's kind of my plan here. So I want to start by filling this with a spray foam and see how that goes. Okay, so while the foam dries that I'm doing on this, it is already getting dark outside. If it's only like 4:15, I need to get all of the trim upstairs sanded while I still have some natural light to make that easier. So I'm going to quickly grab my shop vac, grab my hose and my sander, and run upstairs and just like see if I can sand it all in like 15 minutes. Let's do that quick. Now, if you plan on doing any sanding in any kind of room you frequently are in, you are going to want to hook up some kind of vacuum to your sander. This is our bathroom. There was Bondo, there was drywall dust everywhere. So every time I sanded, I made sure I hooked up my vacuum to it, and that just keeps it cleaner. When you're trying to go to bed and you pick up your bed sheets and there's dust on them, it absolutely sucks. So that is all done. Everything upstairs is sanded. I can jump back over to this. First off, I have to clean off all the foam that kind of got everywhere. This bit here. Okay, so now I have to essentially dig this out. Now that there's a little cavity I can fill, I can essentially, I think this is gonna work. I really don't know, but I don't know why I would. I'm just gonna take some DryDex, fill this up now. The thing I don't want to happen is I don't want these grooves filled because I'm gonna lose my wood grain, so I think that's gonna work. I'm literally just gonna, in case it shrinks, let that dry, move on to the next. Now this kind of worked. The only issue was the foam was a little less dense than I thought. So yes, the patch worked, but if anyone ever presses on this, it's gonna break it so fast. So kind of a good idea, but not my best. So I just finished sanding it, and now I'm gonna take the existing lines that are in from the DryDex, and I'm just going to carve them back in, and hopefully makes it look like wood grain is still there. I'm a little worried about some of this Bondo here bleeding through the paint. So I think I'm just gonna hit it with a quick coat of some primer, make sure it's all sealed. So I don't know if it's the tip on this or something else, but like, that looks terrible. Awesome. Now, lucky for me, I actually took that can back to my Sherwin-Williams store, and they said they have a lot of issue with those nozzles, so they just gave me a full refund, and I got some normal roll-on primer, and I just went back to work. So I primed all the MDF on the inside here, and I primed over top of those Bondo bits right here. So I just came back. Yeah, I'm kind of doing the same thing. So I think at this point, some of this trim has like 4 or 5 coats of paint on it. I just don't have the right flow yet for doing trim, and it's something I'm still trying to figure out. But yeah, basically went over the Bondo, went over any spots I sanded through, and now I won't have any flashing when I go in with my final coat of paint. So it is Remembrance Day in Canada, which means we get a day off, and that means the good thing for me is it's getting dark here by 4:30, which means anytime I can do painting in the daylight, I have to take advantage. So the 2 things I want to get done today, number 1 is going to be repainting all the trim. So now that we've gone through, we've caulked all the seams. I didn't get a lot of footage of me caulking the seams, only because I was doing it with my wife, and she doesn't really help me a lot. So instead of trying to film or do anything like that, I kind of just took in the moment and enjoyed it. So anyways, we're going to add 1 more layer of paint to all the trim. That'll be, the trim will all be done at that point. It'll be fully done, and then after that, in the next video, I can go back over and basically tape it all out, and that way, instead of cutting in all the trim, I want to try just taping all the seams and kind of going over it light. And so again, that'll be another time. So we'll do that, and then the other thing is the doors. So the doors I painted last night, and there's some drips. My first time using my new sprayer on those, on something that big, so I got some drips. So I'm going to sand the doors down and add a really light coat to all the doors, and that way the doors can cure overnight. This can cure, and that's all I need to get done today. Let's do it! Now the nice thing about doing the walls and the way I did it is where I'm painting the walls second, I can make as big of a mess as I want with the trim paint. So I basically caulked all the seams, and then I brushed it in really hard here to make sure all the trim is completely done, and then just to be safe, I put an entire fresh coat over all the trim. So yeah, some of it has like 6 coats at this point in some spots. It was a little bit of a mess, but today essentially what I'm trying to do is get the trim completely done. So that means go back, caulk all the seams, do the final coat of paint on all the edges, go back, do a little brush, go over where I had all the nail holes. The nice thing here, I don't have to do any masking or taping because I only put nails on the top third. So just touch up the top part of these baseboards, work my way around the room. And again, this bedroom stuff is really hard. I didn't expect it to be this challenging because you have a bed, you have a dresser, you still have to be able to use this room every day. I'm just happy this one's done. Here's some of the stuff I have to fix. You see how there's that kind of drip there, that there. There's like a little right there. This one's really bad. There's that. Just a couple drips to go over. So because spraying is new to me, I try to give myself the best chance of success on the second coat. So basically went back, I sanded everything, and then instead of painting the doors vertically, I decided to lay them down and paint them horizontally. And that way, if I do have any drips, if I go a little too heavy on any of the spots, over time, it should flatten itself out. So the reason I got those drips is because I put on too heavy of a coat, and I had them stood straight up. But now that they're down, it laid the paint nice and flat. Now here's where we end this video. So here's the trim. This is as far as we're getting in this spot. Trim's all good, trim's all painted, all the touch-ups are done. Yeah, it kind of looks like shit here, but that's because we're going to paint it next, and it doesn't have to be perfect, especially around those baseboards, because we're going to cover it with another coat of paint, another coat of tape. So yeah, looking at this, it looks a little rough from here, trust me, but here's the final breakdown. So overall cost, I spent about $200 on trim for all the baseboard, for all the door casing, and all the window casing. I spent about maybe 25 bucks on paint because I only use like a quarter gallon, and it's a super paint, so it's really cheap. And then nails, supplies, some other little stuff, maybe a tube of caulk, $8. Call it all in, maybe 230 bucks. We're going to be painting all the walls, and I have found a much better trick versus cutting in with a brush and using this tape gun that we'll talk about more in a bit. Now, as a reminder, this is what we started with, and this is what we are trying to get to by the end of this series. Now, in today's video, the best thing you're going to take away is how to have existing trim that's already completely done, already looks perfect, and how you can tape it off the fastest and get the best possible result. One continuous piece all the way around. So I actually jumped a little bit ahead of myself this morning. I was getting some stuff done while my wife was still sleeping, and I needed something to do that was nice and quiet. And the way I'm painting this room is different than anything I've done before. So this time what I decided to do was I pre-did all the trim. So I put all the trim on, I painted all the trim in place, caulked it all, and I went around and taped it. And then I'm going to seal the tape with another coat of the same eggshell trim paint, and then I'll go over top. And that way I don't have to do any cutting in. There's a lot of trim in this room, and I wanted to avoid all the cutting in, so I figured I could try something a little different. Now, my secret weapon for taping today was this thing. So this is a 3M little taping gadget. I picked this up at Home Depot, or maybe Amazon, they sell it at Home Depot. It's like 20 bucks, and essentially all it is just a thing you put your roll of tape on, and it just glides it nice against the wall. Makes it super easy. It was so fast to do this. Like every time I've done it before, it's taken a while, and I was able to tape out this room so much faster than anything I've done before. So this might be the way I always, at least like this little gadget to put out tape and like a really consistent path is fantastic. So yeah, I'm gonna use this on like everything from now on. It was only 20 bucks. Highly recommend this thing for any of your jobs. So tape is all done. Next thing I'm gonna do is go around and seal all the tape. That way I get a nice crisp line. And then I'll start to go over and I'll trim out the entire room and cut in all my ceilings, cut in all around all the trim with the actual paint. And so I'll pick up when we get to there.
Now this step is crucial to get really crisp lines if you're going to be taping it off like this. So even if you're using a really high quality tape, it can still bleed through underneath, especially like me where I didn't let the tape like sit for long. I didn't let it seal or do anything like that. So all you have to do is take the exact same paint you have for the trim and then basically lightly feather it into this tape here. So that way there will be no bleed through from your wall paint to on your trim. And all you have to make sure you do is just push it into that gap, make sure it seals it, but at the same time you want to feather it into the wall, and that way it doesn't show any harsh lines when you paint over top of it here. Now, like this is by far the fastest I've ever cut in an entire room by far.
All right, so that was a lot quicker than I thought it was gonna be. So while that dries, I can actually go around now, so I can go and start cutting the ceiling. I also do all my paint prep in this bathroom because it's linoleum, and cleanup is really easy in here versus carpet. I have to lay down fabric and other stuff, so. This is our paint. It's a custom kind of cream color that we made up. So all my stuff is Sherwin-Williams. I just like working with them. They're nice people. That, I like my handy pour spout. Reseal it as I go. That way I don't have to put the lid back on. I want it to be enough just to dip my brush.
Now, right about here, I found out pretty quick I was a little bit worried with the coverage of this paint, so I don't know if it's to do with the paint we chose being this cream color, or if it's because it's going over like a purple wall color, but man, the coverage was just not good on this stuff. Like usually on the first pass, I can get it pretty damn close to here, but I just found it was taking forever to get this thing laid out and a lot longer than I really wanted to. So now I do really like the color at the end, but as you can see, if you watch the entire video, this took a lot longer than I thought it was to paint because of this coverage issue. So in the future, when I plan on using this color in more areas of my house, I am definitely going to go around with primer first, cut in the ceiling with primer, do a base coat of primer on all the walls before I do any of this. Now, again, when I cut out, I also do all my outlets, I do all my switches, I do everything here because I'm not great with a roller, so I'm making sure I get far away. Now, the only upside with this was that the fact it took me so long to cut in meant that where I sealed all the tape had already dried, and I could go around and cut in all the trim as well. But again, I'm putting it on the wall here for the first time with the roller, and you can see, like, normally I want way better coverage on this first coat, and most Sherwin-Williams paints, especially the Opulence line I use, has better coverage. So it has to be the fact that I'm going from this cream to this purple, but man, it looked not great at this point, and the second coat didn't make it much better. Now, while I'm painting here, I might as well take the time to give you guys a little bit of background on me. The fact is, before I bought this house, I really had no experience in painting, no experience in a lot of the stuff I'm working through in this process. I've been into woodworking for around 10 to 15 years at this point, and I've always loved woodworking, but all the YouTubers I've always watched have all been woodworkers and not a lot of renovation-based stuff. Well, as soon as we moved in, I found that basically all my woodworking was going to turn into renovations, and I do really enjoy it, but it was a lot of learning process: plumbing, electrical, painting. It was all these supplies I didn't have. I had all these woodworking tools, power tools, but nothing to do this. So along this process, every time I do a new room, I am learning a lot.
All right, so we got one coat down and it looks okay. It is already getting dark. I'm just gonna push right through into the next coat. 2 coats is gonna do it.
Hey, guess what? 2 coats did not do it. After I put on the second coat, it actually made me more worried. Because usually the first coat looks like shit, and then the second coat's really where it comes together. But on this one, it did not. The second coat still, the room is really humid, and you can see a ton of purple still poking through.
So I have the second coat of paint on here right now, and some spots look good and some look really bad. There's also a stain right here that I can see poking through. So I don't even know if a third coat is going to cover everything going on with this right now. So I'm going to go over it quickly with a little roller and like hit the high spots where it's really showing through. Get all those done first in like a light coat, and then I'll come back with a final, hopeful final third coat after that.
Now, as you can see above the Door headers and above the windows are basically the only places I didn't add any tape, and that's because frankly you don't have to be that neat above there. No one can ever see above there, so it's a good place for me to just practice cutting in, but at the same time it's not something I really have to worry about taping because no one's ever going to see it. Now I did try and come back through with a kind of a different technique to lay on the paint a little bit thicker than I normally would, but I was really struggling to get coverage near the ceiling and especially above here. You can even see it bleeding through on my right shoulder there in that middle. That still shows a lot. So I think total on the trim I did 4 coats to try and get it there, and I even switched in a roller at some point to try and add a little more thickness to it, but man, it took way longer than I wanted to. So I was really worried that I was going to have to do a 4th coat on some of where I had to cut in, but actually the 3rd coat did a really good job. So I'm going to roll on the 3rd coat now, and I think it might be done. I'm hoping it's done, because I'm really overpainting this room. I'm going to start in this corner, work my way around. Now, some sections it looks like I'm pretty much doing nothing, right? So in this corner where we're not getting a lot of light hit, you can't tell, but look at this. Look at the coverage difference. So 2 coats barely did anything, but the 3rd coat really sealed it in here. And again, underneath this window, it's also really hard to see because we don't have a lot of kind of light pushing down, but just going over, giving everything an even 3rd coat was definitely the way to move and got full coverage. Finally, I get to pull back the tape, and you want to do this right after you paint while the tape is wet to give you the crispest line you can.
Hard to tell, but that is crisp.
Now, some spots, like I said, I'm still learning, so sometimes the tape kind of pulls away and takes a little bit of the paint with it. I'm not 100% sure why it only happens in some spots, but that makes sure I do keep the paint really close so I can do any touch-ups as I go, because if you forget to do it when you're walking, you're just going to forget about it. Like, honestly, you'll think you'll remember where that little spot's going to be, and then you'll never see it again. So I just make sure, carry it, fix it as you go, and that way you don't have to come back. See these 2 little spots there? Just kind of cut in a little bit, and again, this is also behind the dresser, so you're never going to see this either. But pulling off the tape feels great, but it can be a little more tedious than I'd like it to be, and it feels like sometimes it's a little tough. You know, you need your X-Acto knife and you need all that, but look at this one here. We get a perfectly nice, crisp line. Pull that tape away at 45 degrees.
So we're done. Actually, that's not true. I have a little bit of touch-up paint with some of the trim. Some of the trim paint like kind of came off and is a little uneven. So a couple little spots for trim paint touch-up, and then we're done.
Now, as a reminder, here's what we started with. Purple walls, old trim, old doors, everything in this place, small lights, had to be redone, and here is the after. It was a little bit more work than I wanted to be, but I'm honestly super happy with how this turned out. The cream color in our Canadian winters, when it's really dark a lot of times, is nice to have something light in here, not like this dark purple anymore, and I absolutely love how that 3rd coat made it lay down really nice and flat, so I am super happy with this. Now, looking at the cost breakdown, really not that expensive. Can of Opulence paint from Sherwin-Williams was around 60 bucks. Outside of that, we have the trim paint. We already accounted for that in the last video. That's pretty much it. Tape gun, maybe 20 bucks. You're good.
So the rest of the room is now done. It is looking great. Small touch-ups, but nothing we can't do right at the very end. This is it. The last thing we have to do is this wall. Now this wall we're doing in an accent wall, and we're gonna do something a little different that I'm hoping will save us some money because the rest of us reno is gonna cost a decent amount. With this wall, we are doing 2 major things. We're adding lights to here so we don't always have to use this light, and we can do individual lights. So we're gonna add 2 reading lights above both sides of the bed. And then we're also going to add a pattern on here. Now with the pattern, we played around with a bunch of different designs, and we basically settled on a couple things. So number one, we didn't want to do vertical. The problem with vertical in this room is because the entire bedroom set is offset to the left of the wall because of the way our doors open, you can't have a symmetrical pattern here because it actually looks off and it looks odd because it doesn't match it. You have a symmetrical pattern and then an asymmetric layout. They just didn't work well together. After that, we looked at something horizontal. So we looked at something like having like a half wall or something with a different color. And we decided if we're gonna do something horizontal, we want something with as little horizontal space as possible because we didn't want dust collecting. So we looked at that, and then we looked at shiplap. So we're like, okay, well maybe we'll do shiplap. Shiplap on its own was super expensive to do this entire wall in shiplap, and we'd also have some seams and some other things to contend with. So I decided I wanted to try a new idea, which was covering this wall in hardboard, but spacing it out in 1/8" strips along here. And that way it gives a little bit of design to the wall, but it won't collect dust. It'll be super cheap. and it won't matter that our bed sits off-centered from the actual wall, so it should look really nice as well. The other nice thing too about the hardboard is I have to run all the electrical. So for the electrical, the way that's gonna work is I basically have a wire that comes down here, comes down, connects into an outlet over here, runs around the room to another outlet, which is oddly placed on that other wall over there. So what we are going to do is going to go in the attic. We're going to add a junction box up there. We're going to splice in a new wire that's going to run down, add a switch right here, and then add the wall light right above it somewhere in this area. And then we're going to add another wire. We're going to drop it down on this side. We're going to add an outlet over here first because the fact that we don't have an outlet on this side makes zero sense. So we're going to add an outlet. So each side has an outlet, a switch, and then a wall sconce. Oh, the other nice thing with the electrical is I don't have to worry about really nice drywall. I can take all the drywall out of here. I can re-vapor bury it. I can put everything back in. I can do a skim coat of drywall, something simple to make sure the wall's flat, but I don't have to have it perfect because then we're gonna put the hardboard over top of that. So the first step is actually gonna be, I gotta grab a bunch of wire. I'm not gonna obviously cut the power or do anything yet, but I'm just gonna go in the attic, drop the wire into the wall, start on the electrical. I'll shut off power and connect to the junction box right at the very end to make sure it actually works. So that's the plan. Let's go in the attic. I'm gonna bring my wire. I'm gonna try and get that laid out first, make sure there's no crazy things I'm not prepared for. I've also got them organized. 2 separate spools to make sure I know which is which. I'm gonna bring up my foldable ladder here, and that way I can have something to lay down on if I need to do 2 trips. I guess I'll have to do 2 anyways. Let's see how cold it is in here. Change of plans. I do not want to go in the attic. It is -30 outside today. It is cold and it is scary and it is small. I don't have like 2x8s in my ceiling. I have 2x6s maybe, but it was really small. And there's a lot of insulation, which is great. There's like 12 inches of insulation. So it's really nice and toasty in our house all the time. But I didn't want to be walking around up there. I didn't feel like I had enough surface area. So instead of doing that, I am going to, instead of putting the junction box hidden in the ceiling, I'm going to add the junction box into the wall behind the bed, and then I'll add a cover plate. That's my plan. So I'm gonna start by opening up around this stud here. There's basically a line electrical that comes in here, and then it goes somehow over this way. So I'm gonna start by cutting a section out about yay big, and just open up the wall, and let's just see if I'm actually correct about that to start. Okay, so stud is here, so I'm gonna cut halfway.
When I actually started to open up the wall for this, I was actually better than I thought. So I thought the wire was coming in through the ceiling and then down, but it was actually coming over from like the bathroom. So basically horizontally down and then vertically and then horizontally back over. So it was actually a lot more simple, and I never had to go in the attic in the first place. Now, essentially at this point, I drew a little diagram on the wall, which I'll walk through in a bit here, but I started to figure out how I was gonna map everything into this junction box so that way I could have power, go to this outlet, then continue out to continue to the next one down the wall and use the other outlet. Then at the same time, up to the switch and then up to the light after that. Now, if I learned anything from this, especially when it comes to doing some of this electrical work and breaking in here, make the cutout you need way bigger than you actually think you do. I made an absolute patchwork mess of this drywall. I should have just cut like a 2-foot by a 6-foot section out and really opened it up so I could see what I was doing. But in reality here, I just cut out piece and then little piece and then screwed up with the vapor barrier. And so this first one looks like an absolute mess, but I did get the job done, and I'll walk you through the wiring.
Right, so first one is fully done. I'll show you what I did. So essentially we had one wire that was running through over here, coming down to this outlet right here, and then back out and down the wall that way. What I did is I basically added in a junction box here. So this box has all the connections in there. So there's basically 4 wires. Kind of looks like this, where the one main power wire goes in, one now power wire goes down to the outlet, the other wire continues on its path, the other wire goes up to a switch, which then continues to the light. So you can see junction box, wire goes up, I stapled it, resealed it. This is the switch for the light, which goes above our bedstand, and that's the box now for that. So this one took a while to figure everything out, but now that I have this figured out, I'll take everything I've learned and put it on the second one. Biggest learning was drywall. I kept cutting out little pieces, do bigger. The reality is the drywall I'm doing here will not matter. It will be hidden. I'm going to cut out a bigger rectangle and replace this all in one piece. The other side, I'm going to take out a massive piece and do it all in one shot. give myself enough room that I can drill in here because I couldn't get this in straight, so I got to redo this. Give myself enough room to do this one, do everything I need, and do it on both sides of the stud. And that way I can take the entire piece out, put a new piece of drywall, which goes over top the stud as well, which is good, and then I'll attach it with some more 1x3s on the sides of it. Now that you know that, the second one should be pretty simple.
So essentially what I did here is I used the first one as kind of my template for how far I need for like my drill to be able to put in so I can attach those lights to the studs, and how much room I need for the vapor barrier, and you know where I'm going to add 1x3 blocking in the future. Basically figure out like a rough opening of how big this thing should be. And then I basically just took my level, cut some different lines on it, and then marked it out in different places, and that way I could just cut out one big piece. Now, spoiler alert, even though I did this, it still wasn't even big enough, and I'm pretty sure I had to do some patchwork after on this. So yeah, basically always cut it out bigger than you need when you're doing something like this, especially because it will never be seen. Now, just because I'm curious, what is your favorite renovating tool? Because I definitely the oscillating tool. I use this thing all the time for so many different circumstances. I use it on drywall, I use it for wood, I use it for just so many different little projects around here. But the reality is it's also my least favorite tool. I hate how loud it is, I hate the vibration it creates, I hate how hard it is to get a straight cut. But somehow it just seems to be the tool I always go back to. And yes, I hate it, but if you keep coming back, there's got to be some reason that it's good. So here are the steps that I basically took to figure out and put all the wiring. So I essentially measured out from each one and tried to put them at the same height so it looked good across the board. But I actually didn't do as good of a job as I thought because I did not think about the horizontals later, and I'll walk through that at some point. But essentially I had to figure out a couple main spots. I had to figure out where the outlet was going to go because this outlet did not exist on the wall. I had to figure out where the switch was going to go, and then I had to figure out where the light and the junction box were going to go. So basically 4 different locations, and you can see on the studs there, I marked them out with a Sharpie so I could figure it out. Once I had that in place, I could put in my vapor barrier. So around your outlets you have to use like a vapor barrier cover and put that in. So I put that in first, and then I put the outlets kind of all in their rough spot. So it worked up here and roughly pulled all the wires through with lots of extra, and that way I could kind of have it all roughly wired up, and then I could get a feel for how much I needed to basically complete all the different circuits on here. And there's one thing I actually didn't show. It's because there was an existing electrical line in the wall that I was tapping into to make sure the circuit continued to the outlet to my left. That wire was actually going to be too short now because I had to cut into it and put it in a box. So I had to pull a complete new wire from side to side.
Okay, let's see if it all works. Charger, outlet, power, wall light. That works. Outlet, power. Did it. All right, electrical is up, drywall is repaired. This one I just easier replaced. I'm gonna mud and tape and make it look semi-decent. I think this is 3/4 inch drywall, and I only have 1/2 inch drywall to repair it. I didn't know about that before I started stitching it in, so I'm gonna have to float this whole thing to try and get it smooth, which I wasn't planning for. But yeah, it's definitely a little different. Unfortunately, a little more work. It's gonna be okay.
Now, like I said, the nice thing about this is the next video in this series, we're going to be adding the wall over top this. So all that matters is it's flat. It does not have to look good. So this is pretty simple taping. We're essentially laying down mud, putting tape, and was this even necessary? Probably not. Like for strength-wise, what's this going to do, right? It's completely hidden. It's never going to be there, but it's practice. It's work at drywall. Drywall is very tricky. So anytime you have to practice at your techniques for this, I take advantage of. And unfortunately, honestly, I didn't even take advantage of this because I didn't try and be clean. So I probably didn't even learn anything with this, and it was honestly probably just a big waste of time. Now, putting in the tape was a waste of time, but the thing that was not was the fact that I used 1/2 inch drywall, and on this exterior wall they used 5/8 inch drywall. And what that meant was if I didn't float a flat layer over top, when I added the board and bead over top of this later, you would see it kind of curve and hump down to match that 1/2 inch. So I wanted to not have that issue, and that's why I'm essentially adding this in. Tape, totally unnecessary. The other thing I did with this, which was a mistake, was I used some of like my 24-hour set drywall mud, and that just basically delayed and took a really long time to dry because I was doing these really thick layered coats on here. So yeah, in the future, I'll probably never have to do this again. I think so, but at this time, a little bit of practice, things could be worse. Now, because that dry was going to take so long to dry, I've decided there's finally time to go around the room and then add all my new outlets on here. So I have these easy quick connect Leviton outlets where the wires just kind of push into them and you don't have to curl the wires or do any stuff like that anymore, which was really nice. So I honestly just went around the room pretty quick here, and I added like 5-10 outlets here between all the different switches and outlets, and I did it in like 5 or 10 minutes. Just cut the old wires off, basically stripped them back so you could get there, and then it was super easy to basically push connect and keep moving. Now, normally changing up the light switches you leave till the very end, and this wall is not even completely done yet, but because these walls that are painted, they're completely done, I felt it was safe to go around, add new light switches, and just give myself a little win.
Test it. Yeah. This goes over far enough. Yeah.
Wow.
We did it.
I turned the hard audio.
Oh, I did electrical. Thank you.
Now, electrical is by far the most expensive part of this project. So our costs here, we have our junction boxes were $40, whole spool of wire $210. These dimmer switches and lights were $70 and $40. All the outlets were $20 at a couple bucks a piece. Cover plates $15, staples $8, and then the vapor barrier covers were $20, bringing our total cost to $420. But I'm probably missing a couple things, so call it $450. Trying to go from this to this, and the last thing we have to do today is finish off this green accent wall, and then we will be wrapped up.
Give the wall a quick sand to make sure it's flat. Now, because there's going to be paneling, it's going to be tough to get in this groove. I'm going to cut in along this here, and that way the panel can go right over top of it. This is my first left. Almost all this will not be seen.
So because basically what I'm doing is putting these green panels over top of this, and I have to paint inside the seams, for me to get the paint inside the seams and against the wall and have it look good was going to be really challenging. So I figured it'd be best to put in a straight line of basically cutting in down the wall, and that way that little green section would be easier to deal with later. Now, I don't actually know if it was worth it because I didn't do a great job of cutting in here, and I think my brush is essentially worn out at this point. And even trying to work on this, I'm used to cutting in going across a ceiling, right? But going up and down like this was almost a different skill that I don't really have yet. And so I don't know if this was actually worth the time in the long run to do the way I thought it would. And here's going to be the paneling I put on the wall. And you can see I did the exact same thing here. I didn't want to paint next to the baseboard, so I pre-painted them on the bottom here before tacking them on. Now, what I was essentially trying to do was add these panels to the wall, and there would be a seam on here, but essentially make it look like this horizontal pattern the entire way across. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm shimming it out to make sure it is level now, and that way the entire way down the wall, it's going to be level when I add the connection. The other thing I wanted to do was mark out where certain studs were and other kind of locations I need to be aware of, and essentially go down the room and add these panels one by one up the wall on the left side, and then I was going to come back and do the right side second. If I was going to do the skin, I don't know if I would do the outlets in a different way, but I probably would do like a rough cutout and then use some kind of Dremel tool to mark where the outlets are going to be, because I spent a ton of time working on getting those locations right and looking clean, and I think there was just probably a better way to do it that I just wasn't aware of. But you can see every time here I had to kind of figure out the spacing, and then the spacing was an 1/8 inch where I basically used a paint shim to get it all to line up, and then I'd have to go back after that and mark out the outlet and then cut it and put it back and glue it in place, and it took a lot longer than I thought it would to get this wall up. Now with this wall, I actually made a bunch of mistakes. If I was going to do this again, I would do it completely different. But the first mistake was brad nails only. I should not have only used brad nails. I should have used construction adhesive too, like I have in the past. I didn't think I would need to here, but you will see in a bit how many issues not having the construction adhesive cost me. But essentially what I was trying to do is I used like a scarf joint here where you cut two pieces, both to 45 degrees, and then you kind of mash those seams together, and that way you can sand it flat. That's really common in carpentry when you're doing long runs of baseboards. It's called a scarf, and then you kind of put it together and you can sand it flush. But the way I did it here, it just did not look great, and putting the brad nails this close to the wall, it was really hard to get these filled, and even doing it on an angle like I did there, it was sloppy work, and it caused me a lot of headaches later down the road. Now this is where the headaches with this project really started to kick off. And the fact is, you have to have every tool for the right job, and although I own most of the tools for the job, I went back to the Dremel. I was using the Dremel so many different times for so many different projects on this bedroom. It just felt like the right thing to do next. And the reality is I tried to measure and mark and get these absolutely perfect, and there was really no need to. The old bit on here was smoking up. It was causing an issue, and when I pop it out, it was not exactly where I thought it would be, so I'd have to go back in and trim it and do all this little finicky work, and the reality is I own a router. I should have used a router with a flush trim bit to stick it in the middle of this, run it around the outside, and it would have been absolutely perfect, but I didn't do that. I did this crazy wonky thing here, and that was a pain. Now, this is going to be a long part here, is going to be filling all these holes. So instead of trying to add 1 or 2 nails with a bunch of construction adhesive to kind of have the nails locked in place for a bit, I decided to only use brad nails, and along this corner here, it was really hard to get them punched in and sealed and get that right. And then after that, I had to go and fill every single nail hole that I made all the way down on this wall. So I basically punch it in if it needed to be punched in, and then go back and then fill it. And I did that, and you can see here, look how many nail holes I have to do. I don't even end up counting how many nails, but it would be ridiculous. You know, when you look back at a project and just think, what the hell were you doing? Why did you decide this was going to be the best approach? Well, that is what I'm telling myself right here. So along this seam, I knew on this scarf joint there would be a seam and I'd have to come back and fill it in. But I went so overkill with the DAP on here. It was just way too much DryDex that I basically have to sand it all off. And that's what I have to do next. Yes, every single one of these white specks is a nail hole. And I came back with my orbital sander with a vacuum here and basically knocked every single one down. But looks are deceiving in this because it felt like I got them absolutely perfect, but as soon as you get the paint on here, you can see they are not perfect, and there was a bunch that I had to redo. Like I said, the next mistake I made, putting all these nails this close to the edge meant I could not get in with my orbital sander, and I had to 3D print a little block that I could use on my hand, get right up next to the wall, and then sand all these back. And once again, this step took forever, and when you think you actually have it perfect, you don't. You have to sand a little bit more, because it may look perfect from when you're just looking at it, but at that point, there's a lot more to take off. And this is where I made my biggest mistake, and that was going to be with this seam. Now, I thought leaving a little bit of this DryDex on the surface here was flat. It looked good, but when the wall actually gets finished, this seam looked terrible, and I spent a lot of time redoing it, and I redid it again, and I'm still not happy with it, and it's going to be a new sanding. So the reality is the amount of DryDex that should have been left here should have been little white spots, super minimal, almost not even used at all, but I was just determined that this was the best way to do it, and as soon as I got it looking semi-flat, I thought I was pretty much done. But the reality is, this looked terrible, and this is, a lot of this stuff was time, and time I can live with if I wasted some of my own time, but the fact that the end product still did not look good, that was part of the problem. Now, a bunch of time had passed. I did all the hand sanding of all the seams and all the DryDex, and I got it to where it was looking good. So I basically wiped it all down, thought this part was going to be completely over, and I was ready to paint. But next up is my second biggest mistake I made with this wall. And I'm not actually talking about this. This was a smart step here. So I tried something different. Normally, I have popcorn ceilings in my old house, and cutting into the popcorn is very tough. But I figured what I could do is I could use some caulk and basically give myself a straight line to work with here. So if I pushed caulk into the seam here, the caulk would go into where the popcorn would be, and it would make it easier for me to cut in a straight line. And this actually worked great. I'm happy with this. So this one wasn't a mistake. Alright, so I got all my painting stuff ready to go. I have my little tray to cut in, my brush and rollers ready. Just got to open the paint, get started, get this done. So, I'm already struggling with the little gaps. These gaps are very small. I have to use this. Now, when I'm actually recording this, I forgot about this. Even though I went in and basically cut in, I didn't want to take the time to do the math to find out where these panels would be on the wall, and that way I could paint in behind. So I just thought, I'll wing it, I'll just fill in the paint later. But this is what I had to do. I had to use a tiny brush to go in this 1/8 inch groove along the entire thing to basically push the paint in there and then come back over with the bigger brush to feather it out. And I had to do this for the entire wall. And I can't even tell you how long this took. Like, if I literally just would have put some paint on the wall to start, all these seams would have been invisible. But no, I decided to do it the slightly lazy way, and I did it like this. And this is mistake number one. It took forever. Now, after that, I kind of realized, hey, I'm up here, I'm on the ladder, I'm already doing all this other stuff. I might as well try and cut in the ceiling. And honestly, this went pretty well. Now that I had that layer of caulk down, it made it a lot easier to kind of cut in and pull a straight line. It's definitely tougher because the caulk is almost like a radius, where to cut in really nice and easy, you need like a nice crisp corner. So wasn't easy as it could have been, but doing any sort of cutting in next to popcorn is just really tough to do. And this is my first attempt at fixing some of these nail holes, and I can start to see that, yeah, it did not come out great. And here it is, the biggest mistake I made on this project, and that is going to be the fact that I did not prime this MDF first before putting it up. Not priming this MDF caused me two issues. Number one is going to be it took way more coverage of paint than I wanted to get a nice even texture. I thought one coat, maybe two coats, but going over this raw MDF where some of it was sanded through that kind of top shiny surface meant it was a really uneven finish, and with this matte paint here, it just took forever to get this wall looking good. So if I was going to do this again, I would highly recommend you prime this thing first. And the other issue is only priming one of it. So you have to prime both sides of it. Because this paint is adding moisture to one side of the board, it caused a ton of warping and pulling away issues from the wall. Where basically this bead board, he doesn't know it yet, but as he works down the wall, all this is going to pull away and wave because you're adding a ton of moisture to one side and the other side is unsealed. So make sure if you're going to do this, prime all these pieces on both sides of it beforehand, and it'll give you an even finish, and especially with the construction adhesive, you won't have the pull away issue like I did.
So one coat down, so many more things to fill that I didn't expect. So I gotta go back. I did it this morning before work, that would be dry tonight. I gotta resand everything and do some patching. Do it all again. Second night.
And right here is going to be the seam. Now in this night light, it does not look bad, but once I show you it in daylight, you can see it looked terrible and had to be redone. All right, here we go. Final coat of paint. So this is where I finally get all the pieces to come together. So I already went in, I filled all the nail holes, I added 1,000 more nails to make sure this thing stayed on the wall because I didn't use construction adhesive, and it's already sealed from that first coat of paint, and over all the seams and everything, I did another coat of paint, so that's all nice and sealed. I just got to do one even second final coat of paint, and this thing should be done looking mint. And at this point, it looked great, but you'll see. I'll do something else.
Okay, so we're almost done. We have to do some touch-up paint of the cream. I kind of nicked the wall over here a little bit. I nicked the wall over there a little bit. So, and an outlet switch I nicked as well. So touch-up paint, that's one. The second is going to be wall sconces. Got to hang up the wall sconces, put the outlets back, basically just reattach this electrical so I can turn that breaker back on, turn all that back on. And then the last one actually is over here that I can think of, and we're done. So this door I got as level as I could. I'm not sure if it's the door, because even the track is completely level, and so I'm not quite sure if I screwed something else up somewhere else. But when we close this door, it slowly creeps open to about here and stays, which is not great for someone trying to use the washroom and that doesn't know that that's going to be a thing, and then they're surprised. To solve that, on the rubber stopper up here, I'm going to put a magnet, and that way it'll magnet closed. Three final things, some touch-up paint, calling it done.
You absolute idiot. You had it as close as it was going to be, and you thought you could go back in with a little bit of DryDex and touch up some nail holes. But guess what, buddy? This is matte paint, which means any touch-up you do here is going to look terrible when you touch it up. So yes, that is exactly what I did. I found a bunch of little nail holes and a bunch of little imperfections, and I touched them up again. But now, while that DryDex dries, let's get everything reattached for the electrical. Now here's one that's a little controversial for you. What do you do with your outlet covers? I've seen tons of people paint their outlet covers, and I actually think it looks terrible. If you have a light switch and you paint it, or you have an outlet and you paint it, no go, not a good idea. Pick a finish, metal or whatever finish you want and do it. Brass, black, white, whatever. Make it a part of the room. But these are junction boxes, and I thought in this instance it was okay to paint them. So yes, it's kind of a rule of mine, and I decided to go against it here. But at this point, I have all the power off, and it's now finally go back in and connect all my black hardware here. So I have black outlets, black cover plates. The second junction box there will be the one that's covered, and I just got to quickly wire all these in, and I can keep moving. Now this next up is actually kind of funny. So I had the forethought to put some paper on the wall because I'm attaching these sconces here, and I realized, hey, this matte paint is super finicky. So what I should do is tape some paper on the wall, and that way while I install my sconces and do everything, the paper will protect the paint, and that way it can go there. Same thing here. I added all these switches. Here's my cover plate that I painted because this one's supposed to blend in. It's not technically part of the whole, design with this thing. So just painted the screw heads, screwed it on. That way it's going to kind of disappear. It's also behind a nightstand, so not a concern. But anyways, I'm losing track of what I was trying to talk about here. So the point is, I had the forethought to think, hey, this matte paint is tricky. And then I decided at the exact same time, hey, this matte paint is tricky. I'm going to go back in and try and spot repair. So that is what I'm doing here. I'm trying my best to keep all the dust down and keep it clean and just do little fixes here. And that way I can come back with a brush. And this honestly at this point looks pretty normal. Like when you're trying to fix stuff and do spot repairs, it does look a little weird, but then over time it'll kind of fill in and flatten out and kind of blend in. And that's what I was hoping would happen here, but it didn't. So then I tried to come back with the roller again and do another spot repair. And basically while I waited for dry, I made sure I was preoccupied and I did something else and did some other repairs on some spots where I knew it would work. Now before I show final B-roll shots, here's the cost breakdown. I had 2 sheets of 1/4-inch MDF cut up by Home Depot. Those were only about 20 bucks a piece, plus the gallon of paint that I had for this rosemary colorway. Brought it to $50. Total cost less than $100 to do this, versus board and batten was going to be well over $1,000. Now enough of that, here's how the room looked before. It was purple, the trim was old, there were stains on the walls, and there was no light in this place. But now, here's what it looks like. Now, aside from having to float a new coat on that green wall to deal with those touch-ups, I am so happy with how this project turned out. The cream is bright, it's clean, it's inviting, there's way more natural light. Thanks for watching.